reading out information today related to the 1972 film adaptation of Treasure Island. The film had its origins in Orson Welles' attempts to film his Shakespearean adaptation Chimes of Midnight in the early 1960s, a project he had worked on since the late 1930s. After Welles had failed to convince numerous producers to finance his film, he tried an alternative approach. He wrote a screenplay for the more commercially appealing Treasure Island and promised to make both films back-to-back, filmed on the same sets and with the same cast, for barely more than the cost of one film. As well as having written the script, he proposed to direct Treasure Island and play Long John Silver. According to Welles' assistant Juan Cobos, Welles was afraid that Chimes wouldn't be a very appealing film at the box office, and he proposed a remake of Treasure Island to the producers. It was a way to cover the money deficit of Chimes of a more popular film based on Robert Louis Stevenson's classical novel. Welles was a long-time admirer of the novel and had performed it for radio in 1938. He loved the story, always did, said Beatrice Wells. It's one of the books he read to me as a child. This approach worked. Spanish producer Emiliano Piedra agreed to finance both films. The idea was to use sets and cast for both films, such as the Inn. The proposed cast for Treasure Island was as follows: Keith Baxter as Dr. Livesey, John Gielgud as Squire Trelawney, Fraser McIntosh as Jim Hawkins, Orson Welles as Long John Silver. In order to get a local subsidy, the film needed a Spanish director and Spanish technicians. Wells suggested Jesus Franco. Jesus Franco was an assistant director or second unit on Chimes at Midnight. He would direct from a script by Welles. We had a good script, said Welles. It was loyal to Stevenson. My contribution was to keep it clear about just where the people were on the island, which Stevenson didn't always bother about. You don't notice it when you are reading, just when you are making a film script. Filming took place for a week on the Mediterranean coast of Alicante in 1964, used a rented ship originally built for the Spanish shot John Paul Jones 1959, and subsequently used in a number of other films. Several scenes were allegedly shot, some of which Welles reportedly directed. Franco went on to help Welles for 3 weeks on shooting Chimes at Midnight. The two men had a disagreement after funding from Piedra ran out. Franco got Harry Saltzman to finance the completion of Chimes. Welles was unhappy with the arrangements, and Franco left the project. In March 1966, while filming Casino Royale in England, Welles said he planned to make the film the following month in Spain. He said the film would be in colour, the budget would be $1.5 million, and that part of the finance had been secured from Seven Arts Productions, who would distribute in the US and Canada. Fergus McIntosh would play Jim Hawkins, and Hugh Griffith would play an unspecified role. By December, however, it was clear the film was not going to be made. In October 1971, producer Oliver Unger was going to remake Treasure Island from a script by Wolf Mankiewicz starring Mark Lester. Welles remained contractually tied to the project as both actor and writer. 8 years later, he was brought in to make the film again by producer Harry Alan Towers, who had worked with Welles in radio. Welles still wanted to direct, but Towers said he could not get a completion guarantee if that was the case, so John Hough was brought in to do the job. Welles starred as Long John Silver and was shot in Spain with a Spanish crew. Kim Burnfield, who played Jim Hawkins, came from England. Welles said a lot of people wanted me to do Treasure Island in Greece, but the colonels have locked up a lot of my friends, so naturally I never considered going there. Besides, Spain is my home and this is the place I would rather work. National General agreed to provide some finance and distribute in the US. Towers sourced a boat to play the Hispaniola in the Thames. It was a floating restaurant. He arranged for it to be shipped to Spain, but it sank. John Hough managed to find another boat 2 weeks before filming. Filming took place in June 1972 in Almeria. According to one contemporary report, the director at one stage was Italian Andrea Bianchi, who said, "I knew all about the black legend of Orson Welles. When he is in front of the camera, no matter who is in the director's chair, it is Welles who directs." After a tense initial 2-day period, Welles and Bianchi established a working relationship. Towers says the director was Hough and that he and Welles did not get along. Welles was sufficiently dismissive of the rewrites to his original script and that he asked not to be credited, taking the pseudonym O.W. Jeeves. Welles claimed his performance was dubbed by another actor without his permission. Welles did record a dubbing session, but it was over one long night in Paris, and it was thought that Welles' dubbing could not be understood. Because this was only a few weeks before the US release, that version used Welles' voice. However, Towers says Nat Cohen, who was in charge of the film's release in Britain and on American TV, insisted the voice be dubbed again. They hired Robert Rietti to do the job. Now I'd like to read out some background information related to Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, the original novel first published in 1883. Stevenson conceived the idea for the novel based on a map of an imaginary romantic island which he drew with his stepson Lloyd Osborne during a holiday in Braemar, Scotland in the summer of 1881. He had clearly started work by 25th of August, writing to a friend, "If this don't fetch the kids, why they have gone rotten since my day. Will you be surprised to learn that it is about buccaneers, that it begins in the Admiral Benbow public house on the Devon coast, that it's all about a map and a treasure and a mutiny and a derelict ship. It's quite silly and horrid fun. And what I want is the best book about buccaneers that can be had." Stevenson originally gave the book the title The Sequel, called Treasure Island. 1 month after conceiving of the book, chapters began to appear in the pages of the Young Folks magazine. After completing 15 or 19 chapters rapidly, Stevenson was interrupted by illness. He left Scotland and continued working on the first draft near London, where he and his father discussed points of the tale and his father suggested elements that he included. The novel eventually ran in 17 weekly installments from October 1st, 1881 to January 28th, 1882. The book was later republished as the novel Treasure Island and proved to be Stevenson's first financial and critical success. The Liberal politician William Ewart Gladstone, who served 4 terms as British Prime Minister between 1868 and 1894, was one of the book's biggest fans. It was said that he stayed up all night to read it. 2 general types of sea novels were popular during the 19th century: the navy yarn, which places a capable officer in adventurous situations amid realistic settings and historical events, and the desert island romance, which features shipwrecked or marooned characters confronted by treasure-seeking pirates or angry natives. Around 1815, the latter genre became one of the most popular fictional styles in Great Britain, perhaps because of the philosophical interest in Rousseau and Chateaubriand's noble savage. Treasure Island was a climax of this development. The growth of the desert island genre can be traced back to 1719, when Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe was published. A century later, novels such as S. H. Burney's The Shipwreck 1816 and Sir Walter Scott's The Pirate 1822 continued to expand upon Defoe's classic. Other authors in the mid-19th century continued this trend, with works including James Fenimore Cooper's The Pilot, 1823. During the same period, Edgar Allan Poe wrote MS Found in a Bottle, 1833, and The Gold Bug, 1843. All of these works influenced Stevenson's end product. Stevenson also consciously borrowed material from previous authors. In a July 1884 letter to Sidney Colvin, he wrote that Treasure Island came out of Kingsley's At Last, where I got the dead man's chest, and that was the seed, and out of the great Captain Johnson's History of the Notorious Pirates. Stevenson also admits that he took the idea of Captain Flint's pointing skeleton from Poe's The Gold Bug, and he constructed Billy Bones' history from the Money Diggers section, Golden Dreams in particular, of Tales of a Traveller by Washington Irving, one of his favourite writers. Half of Stevenson's manuscripts are lost, including those of Treasure Island, The Black Arrow, and The Master of Ballantrae. Stevenson's heirs sold his papers during World War I. Many of his documents were auctioned off in 1918. And we'll close it here. Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it very immensely.